back to another video. Today's video is about Wisconsin's circus history. And when you think of Wisconsin, you think of cheese, the Green Bay Packers, cows. You don't think of the circus. However, Wisconsin has a very long running circus history even before it became a state. So today I'm going to be going over some of the most famous circuses out of Wisconsin. In the United States, the circus as we know it began in 1793 with a performance in Philadelphia by John Bill Ricketts. By the 1830s, the traveling circus was well known in the entertainment industry. Due to the advancement in technology and the installment of the railroad system, the golden age of circus was in the 1870s. Wisconsin's circus heritage began in 1847 with Edmund and Jeremiah setting up winter quarters for their Grand Olympic Arena and United States Circus in Delavan. I did a video where I talked about Delavan in my Doveland video, and I pronounced the city wrong. I am sorry. Totally my bad. I thought I was saying it correctly. I wasn't. Everybody in the comments corrected me. So when I saw that it was part of the circus history, I was just so excited. It's Delavan, everybody. The Mabee brothers chose this area because of the ability to support the circus elephants and the other circus animals. These animals were the most important part of circuses at the time, so being able to support them during the winter months was very important. They had a lot of land, it had fresh water, and it was just perfect for what they needed. The Mabee Circus stayed at the current location of the Lake Lawn Resort on Delavan Lake. Dan Costello's Great Circus and Egyptian Caravan was founded in Delavan in 1867 by two veteran circusmen, Dan Costello and William Cameron Coop, featuring 8 camels that were actually a part of the short-lived U.S. Camel Corps, which is an actual thing. They actually tried to have camels in, their own part of the army, which is awesome. Costello and Coop's circus toured the upper Midwest, both overland and by boat. It also traveled west by train shortly after the completion of the Transcontinental Railroad in 1869. In 1870, Costello and Coop convinced P.T. Barnum to join their circus, which reemerged in Brooklyn, New York on April 10, 1871 as the P.T. Barnum's Grand Traveling Museum, Menagerie, Caravan, and Hippodrome. Barnum, then age 60, was one of the most famous people in the U.S. at the time because he had his museum in New York, which was basically like Ripley's. It presented human and animal curiosities, some of them real, some of them not. I think he was the museum that had the fake mermaid in it. But he was very good at putting on a show, and these two men who worked with the circus were like, he is perfect. Coop contributed to the growth of their circus and many other circuses in the U.S., designing a rail car and method of end loading that increased the efficiency of transporting circuses by the actual railroad. His railroad flat cars were joined by crossover metal plates and a pulley and rope system so that they could load up fully loaded circus wagons onto the train and get it off the train easier. Coop had introduced the use of specially chartered excursion trains that brought people from small towns to where the circus would be performing. More money. Coop and Costello parted ways with Barnum in 1875 and started a new entrancement, the Centennial Circus, in 1876. On a parallel track in the early 1870s, James A. Bailey became a partner in a circus of which James E. Cooper was the principal owner. From 1876 to 1878, Cooper, Bailey & Co.'s Great International Circus traveled abroad from Australia to South America and on to Great Britain, before returning to the United States and expanding its operations to include the Great London Circus and the Sanger's Royal British Menagerie. In the process, it became a rival of the Barnum Circus, with which it agreed in 1880 to join forces, combining the shows in 1881 and ultimately adopting the name of Barnum and Bailey Circus. In 1882, Barnum purchased Jumbo, an enormous popular elephant, at the London Zoo, and transported him to the United States, where the larger-than-average elephant, called by Barnum the largest elephant ever seen, became a star attraction of the Barnum Circus. In May of 1884, Barnum engineered a bounty of publicity for the circus by parading Jumbo, 20 other elephants, and 17 camels across the recently finished Brooklyn Bridge to show that it was structurally sound. When Barnum died in 1891, his widow sold her interest in the circus to Bailey, who began a 5-year tour of Europe with the circus in 1897. By the end of the century, the Barnum and Bailey Circus featured 5 performance rings and more than 1,000 employees, and traveled some 85 railroad cars. As time passed, circuses grew in strength and numbers. Hundreds of circus performers from over 26 different circuses would call Delavan their home during the winter. And this continued from 1847 to 1894. But, as time went on, so did the circus era in Delavan. The last circus to winter in Delavan was in 1894, and it was the E.G. Holland Railroad Circus. Once they folded their tents, not a lot of circuses wintered there anymore. In the coming decades, this town would not be the only one to have circuses call these towns home. From Anago to Evansville, from Milwaukee to Chippewa Falls, these towns would call, these circuses would call these places home. Between 1847 and 1998, over 100 circuses, 100, would call Wisconsin their home, a heritage celebrated today at the Circus World Museum in Baraboo. Speaking of Baraboo, Baraboo has its own rich circus history. The Ringling Brothers Circus was founded in Baraboo. It started as a dance troupe in 1882 and became a one-ring circus by 1884 and had its first elephant in 1888. After taking the show on the road in horse-drawn carriages, the circus eventually advanced to using the railroad to their advantage. In 1895, the rivalry grew between the Ringling Brothers Circus and the Barnum and Bailey Circus. The two organizations agreed to divide the market geographically, so they're not stealing each other's business. Following the death of Bailey in 1906, the Ringlings purchased the Barnum and Bailey Circus for $400,000, but continued to operate the two circuses separately. By the second decade of the 20th century, the Ringling Brothers Circus itself had swelled to employ over 1,000 people who traveled with 16 camels, 26 elephants, and 335 horses. In 1919, responding to labor shortages and complications to rail travel brought on by World War I, the Ringling Brothers combined the two circuses, creating the Ringling Brothers and Barnum and Bailey combined shows. The consolidated operation employed more than 1,000 people, 735 horses, and almost 1,000 other animals, and traveled in 90 to 100 rail cars. Now, this circus had a lot of star performers that were well known in the circus community. One of the circus's earliest stars was Mae Wirth, performed flips, leaps, and contortions on horseback. German-born aerialist Lillian Letzel dazzled audiences by performing her acrobatics on Roman rings 50 feet above the ground without a net. Husband and wife Arthur and Antoinette Consello earned fame on the trapeze as the Flying Consellos. Antoinette was the first woman to successfully execute a triple somersault in the air and was hailed the greatest woman flyer of all time. Among the women who made their mark with the circus were the animal trainers. Marvelous Mabel Stark, who commanded tigers for some 6 decades despite receiving hundreds of stitches from being attacked by these animals, and Ursula Bolchin, who worked with polar bears. Arguably, Ringling Brothers' most famous animal handler was Clyde Beatty, who flamboyantly prodded lions and tigers with a chair, a whip, and a blank shooting pistol. The Zucchini brothers acted as human cannonballs, fired from a cannon into a net across the tent. Founded by Carl Wallenda, the Great Wallendas, later known as the Flying Wallendas, joined Ringling Brothers and Barnum and Bailey in 1928 and thrilled audiences by forming human pyramids on a high wire. Emmett Kelly, one of the most famous clowns in history, was featured performer for the Ringling Brothers and Barnum and Bailey from 1942 to the late 1950s. Baraboo remained the circus's wintering grounds until 1918. This circus held on for many years, taking its last performance on May 21st, 2017 in Uniondale, New York. Now, a lot of circuses, not just this one, have an issue with animal rights. They don't treat their animals as great as they should. I mean, they're shooting blank guns at lions and whipping them and hitting them with chairs. They're, causing giant elephants to be on balls or doing, things that could get them hurt. And so a lot of animal activists, obviously, were not happy with the Ringling Brothers Circus or any of the circuses. And they got into so much heat, and I believe there was a lawsuit, and they just couldn't handle the pressure anymore and fizzled out. In 2023, the Ringling Brothers and Barnum and Bailey Circus came back with a North American tour with a reimagined circus atmosphere. They had the typical clowns, acrobats, trapeze artists, human cannonballs. They had music and dance and narrative elements, basically everything you would see at a circus, aside from the animals. The Gomer Brothers Circus, although lesser known than their first cousins, the famous Ringling Brothers, the Gomers made lasting contributions to the circus industry as a whole. The Gomer Brothers, greatest of American shows, operated out of winter quarters on Baraboo's 2nd Avenue from 1891 until 1916. With brothers Fred, Charles, Ben, and Jake as the proprietors. For the following decade, the Gomer name was leased to other circuses and was last used in 1926. The Molnar Bros, Henry and Corwin Moeller, first cousins to the Ringling and Gomer Brothers. It's just a whole family of circus. Got circus here, circus here, circus here. These two played a giant role in Baraboo's circus success and circuses across the country. They were operators of a blacksmith shop and a wagon manufactory. They built many of the elaborate circus parade, cage, and baggage wagons for circuses, including the Ringling Brothers Bell Wagon of 1892. They also fabricated and repaired wagons for several other circuses through 1928. Other circuses with Baraboo roots include John Robinson's Circus in 1898, Adam Forepaugh and Cell Bros' Enormous United Shows in 1910, Houdini Bros' Combined Railroad Show in 1915, Fun on the Farm Circus in 1924, and Wilbur W. Depp's Classic Country Circus in 1961. These are not the only two towns that have circus history. There are many towns across the United States and Wisconsin that a circus called home at one point or another, but these two towns are definitely the ones that had the most rich, historic circus history. If you'd like to learn more about circus history, Baraboo has a ton of stuff. They have a museum dedicated to the circus. They have a clown museum just dedicated to clowns. They have an historic theater that was built, I believe, by one of the Ringling Brothers. And they also have two of the Ringling Brothers houses in Baraboo. If you love the Ringling Brothers Circus, that is the place to go. Wow. They also have a parade, I believe, every year. And they have, shows and little circus performances at, I believe, the museum. Or the theater. Somewhere in town. They embrace the circus history. Now, circuses do have a bad rap. I mean, they are not perfect in any capacity. They have had a lot of issues, specifically with animal rights. Not saying they're not great to the human, they're amazing to the humans either. And, when you're prodding a lion, you're asking for it. Not saying I want the performer to get hurt, but don't prod a lion. I think doing a circus with the human performers doing these amazing stunts is enough. Make it entertaining. The reimagined Ringling Brothers Circus, that's the type of circus I'd love to go to. If they treat their animals right, I'm not saying they can't have animals in shows like this, but a lot of circuses historically have not treated their animals well, which is why the Ringling Brothers went into business originally. So if you love circuses, go to Baraboo, Wisconsin. You're going to learn a lot about circuses and a lot about clowns. If you don't like circuses and don't like clowns, don't go there. I didn't know that the circus history was so prominent in Wisconsin. I mean, there was a circus created in Wisconsin before Wisconsin was even a state. We had a circus before we were a state. Like, wow. All right. But I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I had a lot of fun with it, and I learned a lot. I literally knew none of this before I started researching this video. I knew a little bit about some circus history because I did a video where I mentioned Delavan, and when I was looking up Delavan itself, it did mention some of its circus history. I just didn't know the extent. It's pretty dang interesting. Alright guys, I will see you next week with another one. Bye!